right, so let's kick it off. Thanks everybody for joining to hear a little bit about doing good while doing well, how being mission and values driven can change lives and drive returns while rapidly scaling. We're thrilled to have you here. We created this session really to share lessons learned through leading different mission and values driven organizations. You'll find as you hear from the folks that you'll meet in a second that we all have a pretty deep passion for the mission that we're serving. But we also genuinely believe that you can build a really great and strong business while pursuing your purpose. And through doing that, you can drive really effective prioritization and execution within your business that's a bit more streamlined if you focus and rally everyone around your mission and your vision and values. So we're really not here to tell you what your mission or purpose should be, but we're here to give you some examples and real world anecdotes of how you can build that into the fabric of your organization as you scale. And different organizations need to do this differently based on, you'll hear a little bit about that today in terms of Our Family Wizard and Upsea being at different stages and different sizes and the different journeys we've been on, and defining our mission, vision, values, and just want to give you some examples as you figure out how this fits your journey or whatever company you're in. Ultimately, the one thing I want to say is this is about you actually caring about the mission. So there's no playbook or framework that can replace really giving a shit, if you will, about the purpose or mission that you're pursuing. So it starts there and the rest will follow. And hopefully this just gives you a little bit of ideas on how it can follow from that point. One thing I wanted to say, we're hopeful to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. We're going to do a little bit of presentation. Then we're going to do, Amanda's going to moderate some structured questions that we're going to answer that we thought would be most relevant. And then if we do have time for the Q&A, we'd love to just streamline it and have people do that through the chat versus live verbal. We've seen a couple other sessions where that's been the most effective. So we'll remind you of that at the end. In terms of what we're going to cover, we are going to just give quick company and presenter intros, talk about how you define mission, vision, and values, or at least how we as our companies have. The story of how we develop them, and you'll see some differences, like I said, and then we'll showcase some real life examples and practical examples of how this comes to life. And then, like I said, if time allows, we will jump into some Q&A. All right, so from a company perspective, Our Family Wizard, so we'll talk about us first. So I'm Nick Van Wagner. I'm the CEO of OFW for short. So Our Family Wizard is the market leading co-parenting application. So we support families going through divorce or separation, and then that shift to multiple households. And we really help, our mission, which you'll see later, is to help families living separately thrive. So for anyone that's either been through this personally or may know folks that are in co-parenting situations, there are different needs as it relates to communication and coordination, scheduling, expense sharing and tracking and payments, information storage, sharing memories, so on and so forth. So our product is very comprehensive in that regard and is the market leading product. And we focus really deeply on supporting the families that we help. And ultimately, a big part of our focus is helping outcomes for children by creating a more stable and predictable environment and ideally reducing conflict in situations where that exists. So that's something that really motivates us and drives us on a day-to-day basis. The company was founded in 2001, bootstrapped for a really long time, and then took on a big round of funding from Spectrum Equity last year. I joined in April 2020 of last year and have been really excited about the growth we've been able to experience due to that funding to help meet the needs of many more families. We're lucky to have interactions with other Spectrum companies that are mission driven, like Headspace or All Trails or some other ones where we can learn about how similar stories that we're talking about today. We've gathered learnings from other companies in the portfolio that have helped us with our journey here. So really excited to just talk to you about our journey. We'll throw it over to Hillary to talk a little bit, or actually, sorry, we're going to do personal intros first, and then we'll do the Upsea intro. Throw it over to Amanda first, and then Amanda will throw it to Paul, and then we'll go over to Hillary.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm the senior product designer at OFW. I joined back last September, so I've been on the team for about a year. I don't know if there's anything else you want to know about me, so I'll just pass it over to Paul.
Thanks, Amanda. My name is Paul Ali, and I am the senior Oracle DBA at OFW. I have been with the company a little bit, just over 2 years. I started as a contractor and then I got hired on. So my 2 year as a permanent staff would be October, but as a contractor was back in July. Basically, my job involved making sure the database where the application sits on are always live. And yeah, that's pretty much. Hillary?
Sure. Hi, I'm Hillary Sharp, and I am a senior software engineer with UPSI. UPSI has been around since 2015. We sell warranties that we have designed with the customer in mind. We're still fairly small. We have 20 employees currently. We've added 11 in 2020. That's when I joined. 7 were added in 2019. So a lot of growth has happened recently in the last year or two. And then some of our bigger investors are True Ventures and Samsung Next. And I am joined today by Will Anderson, our Chief Product and Technology Officer.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so let's briefly talk about defining mission, vision, values. And we wanted to get really crisp as we went through. Amanda's going to take us through the process of how we got to our specific ones, but we wanted to really anchor on what each element represents. And it's worth noting, our Family Wizard, having been around from 2001, has really always been a purpose-driven organization, but had, being a bootstrap company, had never really gone through the process of defining these things specifically to think about the sort of scale phase, if you will. So it's not like overnight the company switched to mission driven. It's always been a very purpose driven organization. And we went through this process of collectively figuring out how these things scale. So let me first talk about mission. Mission is really the core objective of the organization. And we like to think of this as why we exist today. And we think it's really important for this to be within reach and measurable. So something that really is the core market we serve, the ability to drive value for that market, and thinking about how the things that we do every day today get us closer to achieving that mission. The vision is a little bit more of a dream. It's the lasting mark we aspire to make on the world. And it's aspirational behind who we currently are. So this may include things that we may not have actually validated, excuse me, in the market yet, but we believe we can achieve them by pushing beyond just the core of who we are today. And then our values are the principles that guide our day-to-day decisions. Excuse me, my daughter had daycare germs last week, and I'm now working through the cold. It's really who we are and need to be to achieve our mission and vision. And it's a common language that facilitates empowered decisions aligned to our culture. So I'll throw it over to Amanda to talk a little bit about how we went about defining what these are for us.
All right, awesome. Thanks. Okay, so how did we do it? So at our Family Wizard, we started by finding people who had shown passion and interest in this type of work. We're really passionate about the company and the people that we served. They're like a mix of new hires and veteran employees. And then people who came from different roles, experience levels, backgrounds. We just really wanted a good mix of people across the company. You want to switch the slide? There you go. So as you see here, we have a kind of a stepped process that we used. And we went through 2 rounds. We did our first round talking about the mission and visions. The second round trying to figure out our values. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about both. I'm going to focus on round 1 with the mission and vision. So those were so similarly tied. Sometimes, companies have them completely mashed together. So ours are separate, but they just are pretty similar. So we started with key questions to start the brainstorming session. We had about 8 people on the team of people kind of working through this. So we started with, we used Excel spreadsheets. I know it's not super glamorous, but it worked for us. You can use any tool that you would want, Miro or like InVision, freehand, like whatever works for you, but this worked for us. So we had a doc, we had different tabs for each person. And then within those tabs, we had questions. So there were 3 questions that we asked to have answered the next week. So those questions were, who do we serve in the market? what do we do for them and what outcomes do we influence? So that was one part of our homework for the week. The other part was to gather some mission statements from different companies that we admire, that we, apps that we have on our phones, popular companies that we know about, and just explore their missions and see where they're at. And it was really interesting to see, like, some have like paragraphs worth of mission statements, others it's like a sentence. And so it was nice to kind of see a good mix to help us kind of decide how we wanted to do that. So we came back the next week, chatted as a group. We talked about our answers that we came up with, and we had someone who was kind of like noting the patterns and themes that came up. We discussed different trade-offs about, why we would focus on a specific type of person that we serve, or how we're influencing, or how outcomes we influence. So it was interesting just to kind of see that in the end, we were all trying to get to the same thing. We were just saying it in a different way. So we just kind of had to refine it down. So once we had those things refined, we reviewed it with leadership to get their take on it. And then once we got feedback from them, we kind of wordsmithed it a little bit and then moved on to round two. So round two was on values. So again, we had another doc of an Excel spreadsheet with all of our names in the tabs. And then the question that we had to answer for this one was, what values or value statements best describe the culture we believe we need to have to effectively achieve our mission? And so we had about a week to work on that, came back as a group, and each person had created pretty extensive lists of words and statements and things that made them think of the ideal culture that they would want. And we talked about those, again, looked for patterns and themes, found that we were all kind of in the same realm. We're using different words. The thesaurus was our friend. We use that quite a bit. To kind of hone in and figure out the best way to describe what we wanted our values to be. So these are the mission and vision that we came up with. So our mission, as Nick said earlier, was we help families living separately thrive. Now, you could take each of these kind of statements. So like, what is a family, or what is living separately? What does thrive mean? And we kind of had those all kind of broken out. And that's what helped us kind of create this more high level one sentence statement. It pretty much defines exactly what we do, which is great. And then our vision is we bring harmony to families through life's greatest challenges. So those are the things we want to work towards and continue into the future. And then our values, we came up with 4. Some companies, when we were doing research, had like, 3 or 4 or 5. Others had like 8 or 9. We were really trying to make sure that we kept this simple, easy for our teams to remember. Because, once you start getting past 4, it gets a little more difficult to remember. So I won't read all of the statements, but I'll kind of go through what they are. So thrive together. Committed to achieve our mission as one team, putting families first. Every decision we make centers around helping families and supporting professionals that serve our families. So professionals in our context would be like an attorney, judge, magistrate, the list goes on, but that's who we mean by professionals. Champion inclusion. We value differences, invest in diversity, demand equity, and champion inclusion for our team and our customers. And then live with integrity. We believe in living with integrity no matter life's challenges. We value doing what is right over being right. So that's just kind of a summary of what we came up with. Now, I'm sure you're probably wondering how we measure the success of all of these. I'm going to let Nick take that on.
Yeah, so the measurement of the mission and the importance of that was something that sort of got drilled into my head in my LinkedIn days when I was there for 6 years. And I think it's really important to think about, okay, if you've got a mission, how are you making progress towards it in a real meaningful way? And while you're measuring progress towards it, also bringing it to life. So we do, and I'll talk a little bit about how we measure it and what that means, but we also do quite a bit to try to bring kind of real customer empathy and compassion into the company to make sure there's customer stories. And we know what these measured numbers represent. They represent the impact that we're having on individuals, and that matters. And you can't lose sight of that with a bar chart, right? So I just wanted to mention that. In terms of measuring it, we actually set a budget, forecast, goals against the mission and how we want to grow our business in terms of the number of families, ideally getting very authentic, deep value from our product. And the families currently subscribing is really what measures that. And for us, that's it's pretty straightforward for us. It can be very different in different types of businesses and how you measure that. I mean, there's for us, this is things like overall revenue and conversion rate and renewal rate. Those are all going to ladder up to our mission of serving more families, right? So it's really important for us to do this. So we report on this every month with the whole company, and we talk about our progress against these numbers and there will be actual numbers on them as opposed to this public presentation. But internally, we're very transparent about that. We think it's really important for everyone to understand how what they're doing contributes to this, and understand collectively, back to the value of thriving together, how we're collectively helping achieve that mission and what that looks like. So that's really important for us, and we really do prioritize across the whole company, across every function, and trying to move this number and do it in a way that's really authentic. There's really no shortcuts. You can't fake it, because if you're not bringing in families that are authentically getting value, they're going to leave, and this number is not going to go, isn't going to move up and to the right in the way that we want it to be. So back to the point I made at the beginning of truly caring, there aren't shortcuts to this. It's about making the right decisions that add value to your customers in a way that's aligned to your mission. Okay, so that's Our Family Wizard. So let's throw it over to Will. He's going to talk a little bit about the UPSI context and how they went through a similar process.
So I've been so glad to work on this with OFW folks, because we think about it in such a similar way, and the importance of being driven by mission, be driven by vision, and have that drive down to the values that are changing, that help us make decisions on an everyday basis. Where I think we provide an interesting context is just we're younger. We're earlier stage. So this slide is just to give you some of the differences and how we had to approach things from a very practical perspective in a different way. We were founded in 2015 for a couple of years as a solo or two-person operation, until we started to staff up in 2019. And since 2019, we've really started adding folks. Last year really threw a bomb on the company with COVID, where we suddenly went from all in the office in downtown St. Paul in our brand new office with the 5-year lease to working remotely and hiring folks all across the country. So as the money was about to hit the bank for our Series A funding round earlier in the year, we had this moment of, we're going to go from a group of people who have been working in the office hour after hour, going to lunches together, hanging out at the end of the day, hearing about the things that happen in between what you're typing on the computer, to hiring a whole bunch of strangers who don't know us, who aren't going to have that same experience, who aren't going to be able to go through those same battles in exactly the same way. We've got to write this down. One of the things that was always apparent to us in the hiring process, and key to how we brought people in, even those early days, was that culture first matters. That is how we operate. We will hire for culture fit. We will hire for people who are hungry. We will hire for people who have an aptitude and a history for growing their own skill set. And then we'll look at the skills they actually need to do the job. So we needed to come up with a way as we're going to scale to keep that early feeling right. Because in our industry, we're trying to be everything the existing players aren't. As Hillary mentioned, we sell consumer electronics warranties. So if you've ever experienced that icky feeling you get at checkout when someone's trying to sell you a $300 warranty on the brand new $2,000 TV you've been super excited about, we're trying to be everything that's not. And so we're trying to find the people that no matter what they do, as they're making decisions, they're going to be erring on the side of the opposite of what everyone else is doing. And that's where it was super, super important for us to get this done and get this done quickly. And so going on to what it actually looked like from a practical perspective, we had to go on an UPSI speed run. So on the next slide, if you could, where what Amanda was talking about was spreadsheets and working through multiple rounds of the process and having to deal with a lot of constituencies. We didn't have that. We were lucky and just smaller, just much, much, much smaller, and have been working together intensely for a long period of time, where we just basically saw the money from the last round about to hit the bank. We realized we needed to get this crystallized. We knew we needed to take the good parts of what had got us to that point, and then crystallize it so it would be more obvious and easier for newer folks to resonate with and easier to provide those guideposts. So we reviewed what we had, we talked through it, we revised it super quickly. And I'm talking over the period of like maybe a week, where everyone dumped their thoughts on the practical side into a Google Doc. We started with what we had already had. We dumped our thoughts into the Google Doc. We then revised it and discussed it over the course of a week, probably 5 or 6 iterations over the course of a couple of days. And then it was up to each of our 3 departments to be able to make it practical. So I'm on the product and engineering side. Hillary's one of our senior engineers. So she's going to talk a little bit about how we took the speed run of looking at our mission, vision, values from the early days. We revised it and then we made it practical so that would be part of our everyday decision making.
Yeah, so the document that we can kind of see on the left there is a product engineering team vision. So at the very top, we have the company vision as a whole, but then they took it and they broke it down to say, how does this actually look in the engineering department? And out of that, we have this section of how we approach problem solving that you can see there. That's in that little cutout. And that is like, okay, we have these values and we have this vision at a company level, but what does that actually look like within our department? So that, as somebody who was just coming on, was a great way for me to look, because sometimes it's easy to get caught in like, oh, we have this vision and this mission, but they're just sort of out there. But this is, what does that actually look like on this team? And then not long after I started, one of the team members had this great idea of, let's take this and use it for our bi-weekly retrospective meeting. So rather than just having your standard engineering retro where we look at good, bad, and what needs improvement, we do that, but we look at it for each of those sections. So we're consistently revisiting our values and what it looks like for our team. So it wasn't too long into that process before I noticed that made me think of these things on a daily basis. So as I'm going about my tasks, I'm thinking, okay, do I need to be communicating better about this? Do I need to peel the onion, dig a little bit deeper? I know there's probably other engineers that can relate. It's so easy to get caught in the like technical side of things and just kind of get tunnel vision that I forget about the customer. I forget about the company as a whole. And this just helps me get back to like what we're really trying to do. And am I really solving a customer problem here?
And so we jumped straight down into the practical, and that's roughly how it worked for us. Is we went through the 1 week period of revising the vision, the mission, clarifying the values, and then we went straight to that practical side of things so that we'd be able to say, like, as I'm making this decision, as I'm just picking up the Zoom, starting a Zoom call to talk with someone on the team, how can I make sure that I'm going to end up on the right side of this? And how can I make sure that what I'm going to be doing with my week or my month or my quarter, that we're all aligned going in that right direction? And so I'm not going to talk through this in any great detail. The thing I want to emphasize here, though, is I really agree with how Nick was framing looking at vision and mission. You'll notice in our vision that we don't actually talk anything about warranties. We want customers fundamentally to understand that they can shop around for the protection that matters to them. Right now across America, most people don't realize you can say no at a Best Buy register, at a phone company, at a phone carrier register as you're getting a new phone and still get quality protection. We want them to be enlightened. We want them to feel empowered. And if they still want to choose that other warranty, that's great. I just want them to understand that there's an option. It also, from the business side of things, gives us avenue in the future for new products. That's another thing that Nick said that I want to reemphasize. We did this on purpose and chose this vision on purpose because it could leave the door open down the line to revising what exactly our mission is. But our mission is reinventing the extended warranty industry and doing it the way that the existing industry doesn't even think about it. And so as we get into our values, I think you'll also recognize this isn't your traditional experience in the extended warranty industry. On the next slide. And there's a part of it that's the external facing commercial side of this. When customers find out about FC, we want them to know and feel all of these things. And we think that we're going to win because this is a very different experience than they're used to working with in an extended warranty company. But for us, and what I want to and reflect on is something I said a little bit earlier, is that we needed to be able to use these values to hire the people on our team who are going to keep promoting them. As we scale, and as I was really thinking about scaling up the team from that initial set of me and 2 engineers to now the 6 engineers and additional growth product person, we're not going to be stopping our growth. So as we were going out and hiring folks like Hillary, it was really, who are we going to be bringing on that will be able to find and vet that next group of hires who will also be able to promote and get aligned with these values? How are we going to be able to do that? How are we going to be able to use these values to scale? And using these as a guidepost to help make really tough decisions. The real important thing for us in setting up our values and writing this down the way we did was to be able to force us to have tough choices. We wanted these values to have teeth, where based on the values, you could end up with a reasonable person making a decision either way. So you could end up talking to a great candidate, and I think about it a lot in terms of hiring. You could talk to a great candidate who is smart, who has done the job, who is really well able to communicate, but they might not have that little rebellious streak. And we want our team to be asking questions in the interview process to understand what happens when they butt against a blocker. How do they approach it? Do they break the rules or do they give up? Are they going to be able to go around it and be resourceful? All sorts of additional helpers in finding that next group of people who are going to help us promote our values and go after our mission and grow our company. That's really what we're driving for. So on the next slide, we also follow a similar approach in measuring our mission. So it's going to sound simple, and we do look at it from what you could traditionally look at as pure performance. We look at it as growth, and we also look at it as repurchase, but for a different reason than you might think. So fundamentally, what we're doing as a startup is trying to prove a behavioral change, that people will in fact say no and shop around on the internet. And we believe once people shop around for a warranty on the internet, we're going to win. So the best way to measure whether our values, as we're promoting them all across our organization, across our top of funnel advertisements that let people know about UPSI, all the way down to how we help people get retrieve a password, all of that's going to be reflected in top line growth. Because we're just inching our way into the marketplace and cracking it open, we're able to look at that as a reflection of living up to our values and achieving our mission. And then on the helping on the empathetic and resourceful side, if we're doing our job right with those customers who have now realized they can purchase a warranty in a different way, they're going to keep buying from us. So yes, these are absolutely things that VCs will look at, investors will look at, that we actually measure ourselves from a pure accounting and financial perspective. But these are core to our mission, is that if we're being true to our values, if we're really focusing on our mission, we're going to be hitting these numbers out of the park. And so I'm going to transition now to Amanda to help moderate the panel.
Cool. All right. That was all very interesting. Thank you. All right. So this is going to kind of bop around from different people to different people. So the first question that we have is, why is this important to your company? I think, Paul, I'm going to have you take that one.
Thank you, Amanda. So I'm going to go back a little bit to the journey between OFW and Spectrum. When Spectrum came on board and the acquisition happened and Nick came on board as a new CEO, a lot of us who were working with OFW before, we were kind of hesitant with the acquisition because some of us have been through similar process. And at the end of the day, it ended up not working out. A lot of the old folks end up leaving because there's always a cultural shift. There's always a shift to more profit-based emphasis rather than building a great culture, building an inclusive company, building a company whereby old folks feel included and new folks also feel included, and everybody was valued. So I had raised, I was kind of hesitant because, like I said, I've been through a similar situation. And Nick kind of reached out to me behind the scene after the company meeting, and he's like, "Look, I love your outspokenness. I love the fact that you value culture, and I just want you to know that things are you're not gonna have similar experience." I kind of took him for his word initially, but he meant what he said. And he started actually putting meticulous plans in place on how he was going to grow the company, not just on the financial side, but also, staying true to the value that, or the direction he wanted to take the company. So one of the things he did was to actually standardize how things were going to be done. We're now going to become an actual tradition, not necessarily traditional, but a very standard company. We have the funding to grow the company now. So things were going to be moving fast, and we needed, an HR person, and HR director, and HR office, which we didn't have before. And once he had that in place, we started putting structures. And one of the biggest thing they did was to start up a culture team. And then within the culture team, you have sub teams. You have diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have community engagement. You have other teams. And I was part of that. And during that process, that was when they went to work in terms of creating a mission, vision, and value that was going to guide the company. Once we had that structure, you could see the change. You could see, we were doing things purposefully, rather than just doing things based on profit and just getting new customers sign up and stuff like that. Diversity, equity was really important to him. Community engagement was really important to me, because this happened in 2020. We all knew what happened in 2020 with the rioting, with the police killing and stuff like that. So we wanted to be part and parcel of the community in which we work and we live in. And so having a mission was really important for us at that point. One of the biggest standout thing was, the vision, helping family living separately thrive. It became a situation where we now have customer testimonial. And one of the research, I've seen this on LinkedIn, that, lately, when you're hiring the people are not just looking to how much I'm going to make with the company, or, what benefit the company is hiring, but employee engagement. When you engage your employee, when you actually show them the benefit of what they're doing, they put in more work, and you're more successful in retaining high quality employees, especially in the tech world, because the competition is really high. So we've been having a lot of customer testimonial lately, and it worked. You can see the reception. You can see how the engineers, they take the feedback that the customers, are giving us. You can see people who have been with the company for 10 years who could tell you, this saved my life. This was more important for the kids. Without these two, I don't know how my ex and I would have been able to go through this, having everything visible, having the calendar, having the receipts, having all of that. So that was great for us to have that vision, so that we can all work towards it. And in terms of the value, we now have a company who value people as much as they value the profit. So we are putting plans in place. How do we hire top talent employees, top talent engineers to come in, but how do we offer them something different from everybody else? Like I said, the competition is high. It's high right now. Everybody's looking to hire, and getting the right people to buy into what you're doing, showing them the importance of what they're doing, but at the same time offering them something different from other company was really important. So one of the things we talked about in the culture teams was benefits. In areas of benefit, how do we match culture with benefits? How do we use benefit and culture to hire the right people? And we have specific benefit that was going to target specific audience in what was important to them. For example, having a family of good, parental leave, that was going to target specific audience, right? Or specific demographic, family oriented people. So having a mission vision driven company really makes it, more inclusive. It makes things more streamlined. So it's really important, and I'm really glad we're doing that.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. That was really nice to hear. Let's see. We've got what was most difficult about defining the mission, vision, and values? And Nick, I'll throw that one to you.
Sure. It's super fun process for me, because like I said, the company's always been very purpose driven. Paul talked about customers that have been on the platform for 10 years, and the way that customers share the in a vulnerable way the effect we've had on our lives. Like that was all, that ethos was always there. And the way we're putting more structure, to Paul's point, is as we scale, it's harder to bring that feeling into everyone at the company as you get bigger, but it was sort of there when the company was really small, more naturally and organically. So a lot of this is sort of like size and stage, like we talked about before. In terms of what was the most difficult, it was really fun. We had a really great group of cross-functional folks. We have people on the team who are really, really tenured professionals that interact with. Amanda had mentioned kind of practitioners and professionals that we interact with, that might be family lawyers, it might be mental health professionals, it might be social workers that support families through this process, and they will refer our product because they believe they believe strongly it's good for their customers. That's a big part of who we are and what we do. We had people on the team from marketing, from engineering, from product, from customer support, so on and so forth. So everyone has a different vantage point of who they interact with and how they interact with them. And they have very different, not very different, but there'll be different ways of sort of explaining our company based on the context of the individual. So the thing that was really fun for me, and was sort of like, we've sort of figured out as we went along, is like, what's the difference between mission, strategy, and value proposition? And we started to get really explicit around like, okay, well, that thing's not the mission because it's a value prop, or it's part of our strategy. And as an example, with the professionals that we interact with, all of their jobs are ultimately in service. Every professional we interact with, their job is in service of helping families in the same way that we are. We happen to be software product. They happen to be, service-based or part of a court system, or healthcare, mental health care provider, so on and so forth, right? So it was those kind of conversations actually almost in some ways helped us solidify things that were core to our kind of value props for different personas too, or at least create clarity across the company and different functions of how that works. So that was probably the number one. So just like mission, strategy, value prop there, and of course vision is the dream, but of the more near term core stuff, that was fun to break down for us.
And I think on our end at the UPSI side, the hardest thing was really coming up with values that were true to us, but would still have teeth in helping us make decisions. So I believe firmly, and we believe, that you should never have a value that's not going to make you change your mind on a decision. And it's not going to help you come up with the questions that will drive you to a solution. So I go back to hiring again, and I'll give a very practical question that evolved out of thinking about our values. And when we were having misses in the interview process, we would be talking with great candidates, be having really good conversations, but still be left with this feeling that it's not quite a fit, and we couldn't put our finger on why. And after each one of those times, in different circumstances, different candidates, we started coming up with these different sets of questions that were really driving at value statements. So the one that seems so far, for me at least, to work the best is, and it goes like this, is like, we're probably a little way through, we've already broken the ice, and I'll say, like, don't give me the bullshit interview answer. I want the honest answer with your heart, and after this, I'll tell you my biggest professional mistake you've ever made. And don't turn this into a strength. I don't want to hear I work so long and so hard, I'm so dedicated that I get a little tired. And what that really drives at, it turns out, I kind of threw it away as a flyer the first time it happened, but I've gotten really bad answers to that question, where I've had people say, like, I've never made a mistake, where that's not authentic. You're not being empathetic. You're not really listening to me. I've had people say I had a typo in a presentation and someone yelled at me, and I don't like being yelled at. Now, that could have some deeper meaning, but the way it was presented in that conversation, it was like, the only mistake I've ever made was a typo, and in particular, don't get yelled at. So like, that's not a real mistake. And it's also driven out other conversations around just still, even with that disclaimer, saying, turn it into a strength for an interview answer. And it gives you a chance, if they do that, to press them, just like, how much are they going to double down? Like, because sometimes, and this is another just practical tip when you're asking this kind of question, sometimes people are in an interview mode, and they're not looking and they're not expecting to have an honest and authentic conversation about really what they want to do, and why they're out looking for a job and why they apply to your job. So it can take a little prodding, it could take a couple extra questions to get at it. But that question in particular, tying back up to our values of authentic and empathetic, of like really looking at your life, looking at your professional career, and being able to talk about mistakes in a raw way, that's really core to who we are as a team. And that kind of honesty with yourself and then with the team around you at UPSI is how we operate and is how we're going to win. But coming to that realization and being able to put like that value down of authentic and empathetic, and here's how we're going to test for it, and here's what we're going to watch out for. And then to Hillary's point, here's how we're going to hold ourselves in our retrospectives accountable to it ourselves. That was really the hard part for us.
Great, thank you so much. One of these questions that I was going to ask, actually, I feel like has already been answered. And there's a question in the box that I kind of want to get to because it's kind of the next question. So are you guys okay with me skipping the one about how values are used since you kind of both answered them? Sorry, we're going rogue. Okay, so how do you know that it's working? How do you know that it's time to look at updating the mission, vision, values? And the question that's in the box was, has anything occurred that challenged you to change the values or missions and how you evaluate the decision? So I think Will and Hillary, you were gonna get that one.
I'll take the first part of this. We knew we were at an inflection point and had to change our mission, vision, values. It just wasn't clear enough. And it didn't have the clarity required to attract great candidates to us. And in particular, overcome the reputation that the warranty industry has. We just in recruiting candidates and talking with folks, it was really hard without a very clear definition and understanding, and being really transparent about who we are and how we operate and why we're going into this industry that we're neck deep in, to get people to talk to me when they have a lot of other choices. So if you compare just base acceptance rate for cold LinkedIn outreaches to engineers, when I would lead with, we raised a bunch of money, versus sending the culture doc and saying, I'm the CTO, can we talk? It's sky high. When I led with values versus I led with base financial greed, it was like a completely different response rate. And the candidates were also like light years ahead. When I was leading with values and I got people to respond with values. So that was one where it wasn't working, and we knew that we needed to crystallize, and we also knew we were getting ready for that scale. I think when one of the other things, and I'll pass to Hillary for some of her other observations, in our retrospectives, we have people talking about problems and situations that we're all sharing, and then we have people recognizing mistakes that they've made. We don't have finger pointing in our retrospectives. That's a function of who we've hired, but the values drove who we hired. So I'll pass to Hillary for anything else she's seen.
Just to be clear, when they hired me, it was based on the money. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll talk a little bit about how you know it's working. I think just the natural flow that we have. When we interact with each other as a team, there's this natural level of a little bit of chitter chatter, like, how was your weekend? But not so much that it interferes with executing on our goals. And then we also don't fall into the opposite side of it. I haven't hopped on a call with UPSI one time where it's turned into just a bitch fest. Like, if there is something to talk about, it's talked about in a way that, how do we fix this? And then this isn't like forced or suggested or monitored. It's just natural because the right people have been hired, and this is how we keep each other accountable on these values. So it just happens. My favorite example of this is what we call UPSI After Dark. And that is where what could be a really stressful thing, like in engineering, you're going to have these moments where you have to hop online late at night or something. And I'll make a comment to a friend like the next day, like, oh yeah, I was up working until 10 and oh, what a bummer. And I'm like, actually, no, it's fun. Like, we just work together so well because we have a common goal, and we're just living life by those values. It's who we are.
Paul, I think you were gonna.
Yeah, I was gonna add to it. I've kind of talked about some of this in my earlier statement. And once you become a company driven by a mission, vision, and value, and you can drive that into your people, you can see that productivity level goes up. And for us, we become more purposeful as to every day we want to do, how do we make our platform more user friendly? How do we make it as easy to use for our customers, right? Every time we have a company meeting, we talk about our mission, vision, and value. And everybody buys into, and it's very easy to buy into what we do at OFW, right? Everybody who works with the company, pretty much you can just go on the street. Every third person you talk to knows somebody who's been through a divorce, right? And you have a lot of personal experiences and stories. I think the first day I came up here, I didn't care how much they pay me. I was like, this is a company I want to be at, right? But I didn't have a vision to drive that. That was just based on my personal experience, right? So when you put a vision and a mission into that, people already buy into what you're doing. It makes people just personalize what they do. And when you're doing something that you can imagine yourself using, or you can imagine somebody, your loved one using, you're going to put your best effort into it. So we use that purposely to make sure we bring the right people in. We bring people with the right attitude in. Everybody, it becomes more about the team rather than the individual, right? We don't want to just cater to an individual, but we want to hear your point. We value your ideas, and we value your uniqueness and your individualism. But at the end of the day, it's about the customer and how what we do improve their lives, right? It's going through divorce and a broken home is it's really messy and chaotic, and how great it is I can add a value, or I can add a vision that will make somebody's life a little bit better, especially when there's kids involved. So that's one of the way we can measure. It's just being able to put it in front of what people do and tell them, what you do, this is how it impacts people's life, and what you do makes somebody's life, make some kids' life better. So.
Thank you. Well, we're at time. Nick, I don't know if we have one question in there. I don't know if you want to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, if folks are still here, obviously if people want to jump off, but we might as well answer a few. If there's the one from Joe, you want me to take that?
Yeah.
Will might have thoughts on that too, or Hillary from Upsy, but.
And just to note, there's also 2 questions in the event Q&A. I think the confusion.
I'll look at those too. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's just if people can keep going, and if people need to drop, that's fine, right? That's if folks have questions, happy to spend the time. Okay. So for Joe's question, as a mission-driven org, how did this change how you structure your capital raise? Obviously different situations for different companies here. So I'll do my best to speak to it. I think I'm going to speak more on behalf of the founders of OFW, who certainly had interest from investors for a long time. I mean, OFW is growing very well, bootstrapped, doing it kind of intentionally a little under the radar, and deciding not to raise capital. And that was, I think, a smart move for a long time, and then got to a certain size and scale, a certain employee count around 50, where it just decided, hey, let's take this to the next level. And I know that there was a lot of interest, and I know that they were picky on the partner that they chose. And I was very picky in getting to know Spectrum, and was fortunate to get to know the founding team. And that was all kind of in partnership. We made this decision. I didn't make the decision on the funding, but the decision to join, we were all sort of, it was all very transparent. And I know that there was a lot of vetting of Spectrum and thinking about the other companies in their portfolio, and a lot of very mission-driven, consumer-oriented companies, and a lot of, we brought in a couple of independent board members that have very mission-driven organizations. Teachers Pay Teachers, Offensive Security, very specific audience with very specific mission and vision. And I just think I'm very fortunate to have inherited a situation where the founders selected a great investor that, like I said at the beginning, that gives a shit about this stuff and understands, as an investor, like, to be very practical, understands it's also a differentiator, right? Like, we believe in our mission. We also believe we have the best product. And to use Will's language, like, we believe it's better for better for co-parents that we're the winner, because we care, and we're authentic, and we're transparent, and we're going to invest the most in the product, and we care deeply about the value we bring to them. So I think there are investors that understand that finding people that are, I've heard people write things like missionaries versus mercenaries. Find an investor that's aligned to that, and I think you're in good shape. So I don't know, Will or Hillary, if you have any perspective on that.
No, we're definitely, we were in a similar boat. We were talking with investors, and Clarence has talked in a couple different, Clarence, our CEO and founder, who did the bulk of the pitching and the investor conversations, has talked a lot about how we approached the last raise. We wrote an 18-page memo that explains our business, explains our mission, explains our customer, how we go to market, everything. And we packaged it up. And so a basic test for us, if an investor was authentically approaching us, or they were doing something, some cynical investor or just lazy, was, did you read the memo? And so Clarence believes in grace. So if someone asked a question in one of the calls he would set up after sending the memo over, he would give them one pass. And say, like, that's actually on page XYZ of the memo. But a second one, he would go hard at them and say, did you actually read this memo? I need you to tell me truly. And at that point, it weeded everyone out. You had people who were authentically interested in investing in the company, or at least considering it, who had sat down. It only took 15 minutes to read, probably many more hours to really understand and build their internal investment case around it. But you got it. Like, you got it if people were authentically invested or interested in the company. Still ended up with people saying no, they weren't a good match for us for all sorts of normal reasons. But we set up our capital raise that it was respectful of their time, but it was also resourceful, because we got to no's super quickly by sending the memo and showing everything about our business to a wide range of investors. And that just saves everyone time. So we got to close, and we got to the right raise that we were looking for based on how we just approached the whole thing.
Great. Let's see. I found some questions in the event area. Can both Will and Nick speak to whether mission, vision, values help or not with building more diverse teams?
Great question. I think it depends a little bit on the mission and vision and values. I think, I mean, I guess if you're no offense to like the Slacks of the world, which is a great product, but like if you're building the next like productivity software on top of productivity software on top of productivity software for white collar desk workers, it's probably a little harder to tie that mission to a set of values around, you know, who you're going versus like, you know, if we're going to be authentic, like if we're going to authentically care about our mission for supporting co-parents and supporting families living separately thrive, like we damn well be focused on every situation those families might be in, and we better also support those situations within the context of our employee base, and recognize that a more diverse employee base helps us achieve our mission more effectively. So I would say, like, yes, if you truly care and you do it right, and if your purpose and mission sort of align to that, but it's still a hell of a lot of work, like you know, and you gotta be very deliberate and very focused and very vulnerable, and like acknowledge that you got to learn every day, and you're going to make mistakes, and wake back up and try harder the next day on making, because there's plenty, we've all got blind spots, we've all got areas we need to learn. So hopefully it creates and I think to some of the stuff that the UPSI folks were talking about too, around just like open and honest, direct conversation. Hopefully if your values support that, then you're more vulnerable in your own personal learning journey towards things like diversity, equity, inclusion, no matter what your mission is, right? So maybe that's, I guess I'm sort of rambling at this point, but hopefully that facilitates faster growth towards, you know, I don't know, it's not really achieving, but progress towards diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And I would add on here, like, absolutely yes. So on our product engineering team, I'm the only person with a college degree. So everyone else has to take, and I took a non-traditional path into product management work, into engineering, into the business world. I was intended to go work at FEMA right out of college. So even I've got a non-traditional path here. An anecdote here is that our most recent hire, a junior engineer who just got out of a boot camp, the way I found him was actually someone liked a LinkedIn post that he had done. And the comment was just something like he was being super supportive of one of the engineers who was coming out of the bootcamp class that he had just graduated on. And I really respect that coworker. She was fantastic. And so if she was liking someone. I was like, I'm going to go check this person out. And like, that's super positive. And all I saw on his wall and his activity was that similar energy boosting up every single one of the graduates of his bootcamp program. And he had taken a completely non-traditional trip toward engineering, where he was in the Army for 6 years. He tried to make a career in music and got really close, but the grind and the resourcefulness and the empathy that he was showing throughout that process, and the self-realization that like, this isn't working, I'm going to make the hard decision, but I'm going to go challenge myself and go through a boot camp and be open and authentic about that whole experience and talk through it. When I talked with him for the first time, I was like, I hope this guy can code, because I really, really want to hire him. And it turns out he's great. But it was just that initial LinkedIn post that came across, like, completely non-traditional way. And us having the open, the values that we do, we don't care about college degrees. We care, can you do the job? And can you do the job we need you to do? Do you have the growth capacity to do the job we need to do you to do in a year? And that his background fits entirely with that. But and another practical tip, and lots of companies are doing this these days, we don't have degree requirements or educational requirements in our job postings. And that allows us to find candidates like him, and also find great candidates like the rest of our team, and frankly, most of our company.
Great, thank you. The other one we already answered, and it was put in here like 6 hours ago. So I think we answered any of the Q&As or questions that were in here. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We went a little long. Thank you for the questions and for listening. And we're around if folks are going through a similar journey, or there's, like I said before, there's no playbook. I think the biggest thing is there are things that can help you structure this, but the biggest thing is staying true and staying authentic to what your purpose is and what your mission is as an organization, and the rest should follow. But I think also being deliberate about definition depending on your stage, so things scale and are easy to create a common language, right? That makes it easier for people to speak to what you really mean, what you truly mean, and create easier dialogue, more empowered decisions. All that stuff I think is really key. So you can tell we all care a lot about this, both in the context of our companies, but also like other companies doing this successfully and growing and being successful in a mission-driven way. So available to chat further if it makes sense. I don't know if anyone else wanted to say anything in closing. Cool. Thanks, everyone.